All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back on season 3, episode 5 of Philly Comedy Club and Last Out Media's RUS GUTIN Experience on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. And ladies and gentlemen, in honor of the greatest day in America, baseball, Major League Baseball's opening day, I present to you tonight our Phillies Special Edition, where I, Papa Russ, have so many burning questions about the upcoming 2021 season of my beloved Philadelphia Phillies and Bryce Harper. And I have invited tonight one of the greatest sports minds in America, my high school and childhood friend, one of the greatest intrepid sports reporters in the whole country, who writes for everything from the Philly Inquirer to the Athletic to Forbes, and is the author of one of my favorite sports books, the Baseball Talmud, the definitive position by position ranking of baseball's chosen players for the layman, the history of Jewish baseball players. Mr. Howard MEGDAL is joining us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up.
So excited to be here. I can't begin to tell you. And your entire opening bit is my last year. You know, I'm an intrepid reporter who hasn't gone anywhere. I've been on Zoom. I've talked to people remotely. It is 100% a lockdown experience. So this is as social as I've gotten since last March.
This is incredible, Howard, and I am so honored that you say that, because you have Zoomed with some of the biggest names in every sport there is to imagine from home. But tonight, during the women's college basketball Final Four, you have chosen to talk to me. But that is absolutely not a surprise, because what I want to tell the audience at home, Howard, is that you and I have known each other actually since high school. Yeah. We grew up as good Jewish boys in one of the most Jewish places on planet Earth, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and we went to Cherry Hill East together, and we're in the drama music wing, D wing, every day together. So I can only imagine, Howard, how proud and how hard your Jewish mother plots when you wrote the Baseball Talmud, the history of Jewish baseball players in the Major League, covering the history of our people in the grand old game, which is actually, am I correct, is now going into its second edition?
Yes, I am at work at the updated second edition, which will come out in the spring of 2022. There have been many more Jewish players even since 2009. So I know,
and I'm gonna mention that in a second. So first, I have to ask you, Howard, because I have the original version of the book, and then my wife got me this absolute pristine, beautiful copy that isn't as Russell-fied from being in all of my comedy travel bags. Okay, so my first question for you is, besides wanting to prove that not all Jews are not athletic, okay, what inspired you deep down in your core to write this book and put it out in the world?
Well, you know, the arguing is really what did it, which I mean, should not be a surprise given, you know, how much that is a feature of us as a people. But just being able to have these debates and be able to sort of start them once and for all. I like the idea that I was going to be able to write this book and, you know, have it be a starting point. Although, you know, when we would do book events, you would have people who would, you know, stand up in the audience and who would vigorously dispute it and would, you know, get very angry about it.
Really?
Oh, sure. I had people who would claim that we were out in Long Island, which, you know, should not surprise
you. Of course, yes, the most calm, easy place to perform or present something ever.
I mean, you know, so this guy gets up and, you know, I think you should know that Derek Jeter was Jewish. And, you know, you're doing a book event. He's not Jewish. And, you know, you don't want to just call the guy a liar in front of a room of people. But yeah, there was a lot, and so somebody else got up and was arguing with him that Jeter is not Jewish, and there was almost like a fist fight that broke out, and that was really the goal.
Oh my God! Yeah, you did it.
That's it. You talked about my mom, and my mom obviously, if anyone runs into my mom and doesn't come away with like either a website that you need to visit that I've written for, or places the Amazon order on your phone while she's there.
Yeah, she's gonna watch you. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. She's gonna. I need to see the receipt. And so
she's gonna read your credit card off for you.
Exactly right, if she has to. And so what it comes down to is, for that combination of pride and arguing, as much as I love the game and I love the stats that go under it, and we were seeing more and more of those numbers become a bigger part of the conversation, so you could start to rank people in different eras. That was what was really exciting for me.
I think it's really funny that people would argue, because the book is very heady. It's based in, fact and statistics, and you bring things to the surface that people either have forgotten or just simply don't recognize at all. So I find that sort of, I find that sort of odd, because like I said, your book is very based in analytics and sabermetrics and all those buzzwords that everybody likes to say nowadays that they think they understand, but they fucking don't, right? They don't know what coding means, they don't know what Bitcoin is, and they don't know what roar is or velocity angle. People talk about it, but they don't know what they're talking about. And
I don't know Bitcoin, that's for sure.
Well, no. I wish I did understand it. The one nerd thing I never did was Magic the Gathering, and here I am talking to you on Zoom. I could be on a speedboat with Elon Musk, like I said, and it also turns into a hovercraft and an underwater submarine. Okay, but that's what I'm talking about with your book. Okay, before we get into the Phillies, with your book, the thing that I really liked about it is that there's really so many cool stories and so much history and context of those moments sort of packed into every page. I personally, even as a know-it-all Jew, did not know that our people had such a rich history in the grand old game. And one of my favorite stories, though, is about the Jewish baseball player who was a spy, or became a spy, if you will. Okay, so I have two questions for you. One, if you would give our audience at home a little boilerplate, little breakdown of that story, okay? But two, my second Russell question for you is, Howard, as a great writer, are you or are you not currently working on a screenplay, starring me, of course, about that story called Rocket Arm? The tagline, he had a wicked fastball, a license to kill, and always calls his mother. Or no? Do you feel like that might derail your already respectable career?
It wouldn't derail it. It would be delightful to be a part of. I will just say, so Mo Bird is the person we're talking about, who was a spy. He played shortstop at University of Princeton. He got a law degree. He studied the Sorbonne. He was just this incredible Renaissance man who went on to a long career as a catcher, and then went from there to be part of the OSS, which was the forerunner to the today's CIA.
Correct.
But what's interesting, there have been a couple of movies recently about him. A woman named Aviva Kempner did a great documentary about him. She's done a Hank Greenberg documentary and one about Mo Bird that's very much worth your time. And Paul Rudd, who, is sort of like, to my mind, like, the RUS GUTIN of...
Yeah, no, he's ageless. Yeah, he's almost as ageless as me.
Same basic idea. Yeah, exactly. And he was the star of one that I must admit I have yet to see. It got terrible reviews, and I've yet to watch it. But there's that much interest in the Mo Bird story.
Wow.
He's just a very
I only knew about it from your book, to be totally honest. Like, I had not heard that story until I read your book originally when it came out, and then when I was skimming it the other day. It's one of those things. There's so many cool stories in the book, but I mean, it's hard to beat that one. So
hard to beat Mo Bird, Jewish or not. you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And we
no, I
already
think
knew
we
that
should write the
in that.
musical
Yeah.
then. You know what I mean?
Right.
If Paul Rudd already made the
Well, that's
movie,
time.
then it's got to be like, he's got a license to kill, you know, it's Rosh Hashanah, you know he's gonna call the slider, you know, I don't know. Listen, we're just workshopping it. We're
But it's
just
just at the
workshopping
very
it.
beginning, of course. We have a lot to get to. We
Yeah.
will absolutely make sure we make that happen. I like it.
Oh my God, brilliant. So, Howard, the reason I have really asked you tonight to be here as part of season 3, episode 5 of the Phillies special edition of the RUS GUTIN Experience is that besides being an author, is that you are also one of the country's best and brightest intrepid sports reporters. You cover almost every single sport, and you've been featured in everything from The Athletic, the Philly Inquirer, to Forbes. You wrote an incredible article about the Eagles earlier this year, and the Carson Wentz drama that I absolutely I drink it up, you know, like Daniel Day-Lewis. I drink your milkshake, Howard. I drink it up. Okay, okay. So I have asked you to come by the show tonight so that I can ask you all of my burning questions about the upcoming, or just started yesterday, 2021 season of my beloved Bryce Harper and Philadelphia Phillies, so that I can get a more rational, objective, national sort of perspective on the Phils this season. Are you game for this, Howard? Are you ready
I,
for me to pepper you with questions the way you
I,
pepper other people?
I have worked hard to prepare and feel ready.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. You've lived it your whole life for this
Yes.
moment. Okay.
It's all been training.
Yeah, yeah. Big time players make big time plays in big time games. Okay. So it's all you tonight. So my first question for you, respectable reporter Howard Megdal, is with Bryce Harper being the biggest free agency signing in Phillies franchise history just a few years ago at a 13-year deal with his salary, of course, spread out over that time. So it's sort of team friendly. I ask you straight up, do you think to this point, Bryce Harper has lived up to his contract?
My simple answer is yes, absolutely.
Yes!
Absolutely. Now, Bryce Harper was signed at that level in terms of years, in terms of money, because he is a superstar. If you are going to get a player at that level, you can do it in one of two ways. You can develop that player the way, say, the Padres did with Fernando Tatis Jr. or the Nationals did with Juan Soto, or you can sign him via free agency. And it's very rare you're able to do that because most of the time those players are going to be locked up long-term by their original teams.
Correct.
When you can go get that guy, whether it's Lindor in New York or it's Bryce Harper in Philadelphia, you do what is necessary to make it happen. And since he's been in Philadelphia, he has been a superstar level player. He hasn't won an MVP yet. The Phillies haven't gone to the World Series. The reason for the second part is a lot of things that have nothing to do with Bryce Harper.
That's
So,
right.
you know, and the other part of it is, and people really make this mistake. They think, all right, 13 years, $300 million. You know, well, he's going to have to be worth that at the end of the contract. And that's not really how it works at all.
Right.
If you're a large market team, and Philadelphia is the 5th largest market in Major League Baseball, so they're
Correct.
a large market team. Anyone who pretends otherwise is looking for an excuse for the owner not to spend money. So you're looking to do something very simple. You're looking to get excess value out of the peak, and then in the decline years, then you live with that because you've gotten the excess value out of the peak. And at that point, you mitigate it by signing the next guy you're getting excess value at. 10 years from now, Bryce Harper's probably not going to be a star. You get somebody else to do it. In the meantime, you've had Bryce Harper play for your team. And there's another element to it. It reminds me of the picture I saw with your daughter yesterday on social media, which is to say you have an opportunity not just for something financial, but something emotional. I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old daughter, and I am going to now for the next 10 years be able to take them to Citi Field and watch Francisco Lindor play baseball. They're going to look back on their childhood. They're going to remember that. Your children are going to remember getting to see Bryce Harper play. That matters, and that is a not insignificant part of what is the entertainment industry at the end of the day,
Yeah,
most of all. So I
I really
absolutely
appreciate that.
love the signing. Love it.
Thank you, Howard. And you know, it's hard being in Philadelphia because Negadelphia is a real sickness, and
Yes.
I have the same element with Philly fans that I do with comedians sometimes because I have
Mm.
a musical theater, jazz hands, optimism.
Right.
And so that emotional element that I always bring up, you know, what he brought to the culture, what he
Hmm.
brought to, you said it exactly right. My daughter, who hasn't been to a baseball game yet, my son has. We've gone a bunch of times,
Hmm.
but she is so excited to go to that game, almost as excited as I am,
Yes.
and that's what it's about.
Well, can I just say this too? Like, if you don't, if you're in the NBA and you don't spend on a guy, you save money. You're under the salary cap. There's a potential benefit down the line. You can sign a better guy. There's no salary cap in baseball.
Right.
So if John Middleton doesn't sign Bryce Harper, he's not going to drop dollar bills from the sky on opening day that everyone gets to scoop up. He's just going to keep the money. So
Yeah,
you might as
yeah.
well have him spend, it's not your money, have him spend that money on making sure the team you root for is as good as it possibly can be.
And you know what? Listen, I know he gets a lot of shit for that press conference that he did. I'm not a potted
Hmm.
plant sitting in the corner, okay?
Right,
It's a very
right.
famous quote now. But he got on his plane and he did get Bryce. And
Hmm.
I do think at the trade deadline this year, if they're there, they're going to go over the luxury tax every day.
Hmm.
Listen, all people do on sports radio all day here is spend John Middleton's money and spend Josh Harris's money and spend Jeffrey Lurie's money. And no one knows who owns the Flyers anymore, but whoever money they're working with, that's so I appreciate that someone like you can see that from a bird's eye view, right? Okay,
Hmm.
because you are a Mets fan at your core. So
Hmm.
for you to see that it's changed the culture and the excitement in Philly, that's actually part of what you're paying Bryce Harper for. And to me, that's why he has lived up to the contract. And I'm going to mention it in a few minutes. Not everything has to do with Bryce, okay?
Right,
So, because
exactly.
my next two questions do pertain to the Phillies' playoff chances this year, okay?
Hmm.
So, last season, speaking of things not being Bryce's fault, okay, the Phils had not only one of the worst bullpens in franchise history, but they had one of the worst bullpens in the history of the sport itself. On the broadcast yesterday, they said it was the worst bullpen in 90 years. Herbert Hoover was president, okay?
Hmm.
They lost 20 plus games in which they already had the lead. And I found this out today while I was prepping for the show and prepping to sound smart in front of you. But this really made me almost like faint right in my backyard.
Hmm.
Was that they only won one game last year where the starting pitcher left with a lead.
Oh, God.
So winning yesterday,
Yes.
we are already tied with that statistic from last year. So I guess this is my question, basically, is if the moves that our new look front office and Dave Dombrowski have made with the bullpen
Hmm.
this offseason can even cut that horrible set of statistics and record that I just talked about down by even a third. Do you think that gets the Phillies over the hump and into the playoffs for the first time since 2011?
So the simple answer is that if we just went back to 2020, the answer is yes. If you were just looking, and so I wrote about this when Dombrowski took over. I was in the Zoom for that presser and wrote
Yeah.
a little bit about just the way he approached it. And there were two parts to it. One is Dombrowski didn't come for a teardown. There was some real thought earlier in the
Right.
offseason that they might even do things like let Real Muto go, trade Zach Wheeler. I mean, you heard all the
Oh,
same rumors.
kept
And
me
so
up
when
at night.
right, but it would have been 5 years. And so you bring in Dombrowski to win now, and that means Real Muto's back, that means Gregorius is back, but you have a bullpen with a 7.07 ERA. last year, which, like
Yikes.
you said, worse since the 1930 Phillies. I mean, which, you know, is a real feather in the cap for Philadelphia Phillies history, that they are the benchmark
I
that they
mean,
have
Jesus,
now.
Howard, you know what I used to say to Dara? I would be at the show in Atlantic City, and I'd say,
Mm.
all right, Dara, I'm going to drive home now and listen to the Phillies lose. I'll see you when I get there. Because it was just like you could set your fucking watch to it.
It was, I mean, I've just never seen anything like it. And I've covered some teams with some bad bullpens, but this was the worst. And the reason I say that if it was 2020,
Wow.
they'd be in the playoffs is I ran a regression analysis because, you know, we did
Whoa.
lots of fun things during quarantine. And so if
So
you
much
just
time.
made the Phillies, right, if you just made the Phillies league average in the bullpen last year, and you go runs scored, runs allowed,
Right.
what would their likely record have been? Would have been 35 and 25. That would have been tied with the Braves in the playoffs, tied for the division lead. Here's the problem. The problem is that all the other teams in the division did get better this offseason. You know,
Yeah,
the
that's my
Nationals,
next question. Yeah, for you. I have a question about that. That's a big factor.
So we can get to that, but you know, just the short answer is the 2020 Phillies with a normal bullpen, just an average bullpen, would have been a playoff team. 2021, you're asking them to do something a little more than that.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So you think that the expectation is bigger than getting over the hump?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean that team was significant. I mean, a top 3 offense in the National League.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
They said,
team
yeah.
has frontline starting pitcher. I'm a huge Nola guy. Wheeler's been terrific.
Wow.
I think very highly of Zach Eflin. So does Joe Girardi, who talks him up at every turn. Spencer Howard, you know, people give up on him because he had a rough year last year. No one was preparing in the normal way. I don't know if you were feeling your best in July of last year,
Yeah.
but I wasn't, and neither was Spencer
Right.
Howard. And so his velocity was down about 5 miles an hour. You saw it was back up this spring. He's one of the best pitching prospects in the game. They have some real opportunities before you even get to Jose Alvarado, who you saw yesterday. He throws 100
If he
miles an
gets
hour.
control, Howard, if he can
Mhm.
get control, because he's really the one left-hander
Yeah.
in the bullpen. So
Yeah.
you're really counting on him. If you're going to have Archie Bradley, you know,
Well,
and Howard as a setup guy, you need Alvarado to you know, and Hector Neris to do their thing.
here's what I will say about Archie Bradley, though. Even though he's a righty, if you go into his splits, he's been very effective against left-handed batters throughout his career. So that gives you an additional option. I understand, and Dombrowski talked a little bit about this in his last presser before the season started, that, you know, look, we have these options. You know, Neris can get lefties out. Archie Bradley has a history of getting lefties out, so we felt a little more comfortable leaving Alvarado out there as the lone lefty. And then don't forget, of course, there's this rule now that you have to face 3 batters. So
Right.
a lefty-only specialist is a little harder to justify, especially a second one. So I don't think it's a bad. I like the makeup of their bullpen. I really do. I think that they're going to be much, much better than they were last year.
I will say this: when I was watching the game yesterday, Howard, I really mean this. That was a game that last year they were going to lose. I would have started preparing my sandwich and deciding what I was going to watch. You know, like it was just like, you know, it was just like sort of assumed. So yesterday, again, I don't know what they said to Alvarado after those first few pitches, whatever, because, you know, the reason I'm so excited they signed JT is in my comedy career, I've really become this sort of consummate sort of leadoff guy, this sort of, you know, very reliable host. And the host, who people in sort of that circle, we're sort of, not only do we have to be good at what we do, we have to sort of know what everybody does best, know what to say, what not to say. So to me,
you got to call the game.
Yeah. And I mean, he's really he's the field general. He's the director. He's the showrunner. And that's what I am in my particular. It's not exactly how I planned it, Howard. You know, I want to be the star, but there's something about me where I can sort of get everybody to sort of get on the same note. And I saw yesterday that, you know, all the money they spent on JT was worth it yesterday, because whatever he said to Alvarado, he had a few more pitches in the dirt but not many. And he sort of got us out of that inning, thank God. And then, of course, you had the great catch from Alec Boehm and Didi.
But JT blocking the plate too.
Oh my God! With the
you're not in
broken
position to win
thumb,
that game. Yeah.
I was terrified, Howard. If it was the old rules, you know,
Oh yeah.
you know, pre-Buster
Could've been the end
Posey
of the
rules,
season.
then I was terrified that JT and Joel were both going to be getting protein shakes at their rehab together. So speaking, though, we've actually alluded to it a little bit, and thank you again for joining us so much, Howard, is speaking of off-season moves and the Phil's front office being much improved with Dave Dombrowski, who I absolutely love. I would change my son's name to Dave Dombrowski if it wasn't too late. The Phillies are much improved, but as we alluded to, the National League East is also much improved. The Nationals, your team, the Mets, the Braves, they have all bolstered their starting pitcher and their infields. And those three teams, to your point earlier, all seem to have better farm systems in place. I think Dombrowski can fix that. But you guys do develop players and do bring them to the next level, where the Phillies have sort of lacked in that over the last few years. So I guess what I'm saying is, and I think you've sort of answered it a little bit, but do you think between the bullpen, JT Realmuto, all these things, have they made enough moves to get into the playoffs this year, or only enough to keep pace with their division rivals?
I think it's more the latter. And let's not forget about the Marlins too. The Marlins made the playoffs last year. The Marlins have one of the great young pitchers who actually came through the Philly system in Sixto Sanchez. And,
yeah, that's another one that you hear all the time. We never should have got rid of Sixto Sanchez.
God, I can't tell you how much I miss the Philly fan. Just when I come down to do a game, to do a story, I walk around the concourse, whether it's at Citizens Bank Park or the Wells Fargo Center, because I got to hear it. I got to hear the Philly fan. It's a feeling, at the link, walking. That was like, for Silver Linings Playbook, that was my favorite part of that entire movie, was the way they captured what it's like outside at the link. It is an entire state of mind.
We were just talking about that movie yesterday. Dara and I saw it at the Marlton 8. We were home, I guess, visiting.
Sure.
And so I remember saying to Dara when we left that movie theater, I said, that audience was so hyped and loved it so much, but there was an element of like, yous all can enjoy this movie, but this movie is ours.
That's right.
It's for us.
It absolutely felt that way. Right, and so my wife and I watched it, and she enjoyed the movie, but I felt the movie. I just see the difference. She's from Rockland County, New York. It's just a different thing. That was the feel. But yes, like in answer to that question overall, like there are 5 teams that could win that division, and so by the way, the Sixto Sanchez, you traded Sixto, you get JT Realmuto, both sides win in that scenario, especially because the Phillies were able to keep JT for the long term. But he's terrific, and the Marlins have a lot of talent.
And the Marlins have had our number whether they were good or not. Even in these last few years, they beat us like 3 out of 4 almost every time.
And don't forget, it's not a small thing that the Mets went from an ownership group that lost a significant amount of their money to Bernie Madoff. Their second Ponzi scheme is always my favorite. Like they were victimized by a Ponzi scheme, and you'd think, well, they'd pay attention the next time. But no, it couldn't wait. Couldn't wait for the next Ponzi scheme. And, very exciting. And they were replaced by the guy who was based on the character, I shouldn't say that, the character in Billions, Bobby Axelrod, was based on him.
Yes.
That's a better trade than Sixto Sanchez for JT Realmuto.
Ooh, shots fired.
That is Lenny Dykstra and Roger McDowell for Juan Sandoval.
Ooh, what a dark day on Philly radio that was. My goodness, when Nails went away. Oh my goodness. So this is actually, first of all, thank you for all that. I love hearing those kind of perspectives, especially from someone like you who really truly knows what they're talking about, as opposed to the guy who's like, I played junior varsity, I started 4 games, it takes conditioning, but you can hear his sleep apnea mask, you know, like, so it's, you know, like it's hard to get perspective here. So that leads me to my next question. This is more of a baseball Phillies,
Yeah.
baseball history Phillies question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because here in Philly, the 2008 World Series run and team, you know, the whole lead up, 2007 versus Diamondbacks in 2008, and then everything that came after. But that 2008 year, that run, that team is still so legendary and sort of at the forefront of our baseball minds. I know for me, Howard, I grew up both a Yankees and a Phillies fan. My family's originally from New York,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
then we
remember.
grew up here in South Jersey. So I grew up liking both, but my love of where I was from is what ultimately, you know, where I grew up is ultimately what took over. But when I moved to
Yeah.
Los Angeles, my good group of friends was the Nest of the West. It was all Philly, South Jersey people in LA. So we did everything together. So when I think about the 2008 Phillies, I think about experiencing that. I was there
Mm-hmm.
when Matt Stairs hit his home run in Dodger Stadium.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, no, security wouldn't let the Phillies fans leave. They actually said, you guys stay here. And we said, oh, are you going to come back and get us? And they said, what are you, nuts? We're staying here with you guys. If we go out there, they'll fucking kill all of us. So we stayed there for like an hour. I handed everybody flyers to the Comedy Store. You know, so just from my own personal perspective, but even in a very meta way, just the way I think about it, the 2008 Phillies World Series team is our shining guiding light, okay?
Yeah.
And my question for you is, we see a lot of those players and that team here in Philly through Phillies colored glasses, as I like to say.
Mm-hmm.
And we insist that a bunch of them should eventually get into the Hall of Fame, okay? So I guess my question for you is, as a national baseball reporter, okay, do you think that any of the great starters from that 2018, Chase Utley, Ryan Howard, Brad Lidge, Cole Hamels, Jimmy Rollins, and etc., do you think that any of them will ever rise to the level of being in contention for Cooperstown?
So my best candidate among that group is Chase Utley. I
Ooh.
think it is a difficult argument for Ryan Howard, in part because so much of his value came offensively, in part because his peak was on the shorter side. Now, part of that's not his fault because, you know, Jim Thome was here, and so there was a bit of a delay with that. But he didn't really put up the numbers. If you want to have a Jewish baseball comp, Al Rosen was a similar situation with Cleveland in the 40s and 50s. Great third baseman named Ken Keltner kept Rosen in the minor leagues till his mid-20s. And then, like Howard, injury shortened his career at the far end of it.
For
So I think
sure,
that's
yeah. The dip at the end, I feel like, is always what people bring up.
It's a hard combination because he got hit at both ends. Jimmy Rollins is a fantastic player. I don't know that he quite gets there. But when you look at Chase Utley, who, by the way, also had his career a little bit shortened at the start, you know, with Placido Polanco and a timeshare, if you remember, before he got to be a 150-game-a-year player. Chase Utley, for a period of 6 years, was the best second baseman in baseball. He was elite defensively. He was a wonderful offensive player, not just for power. He got on base on a regular basis. He did everything you could ask for from a player. And so I think it's going to be a struggle. You know, you see even guys like a Jeff Kent are struggling to get into the Hall of Fame. Does Utley have a better chance? I think he ought to. I did a story about this, though, when Utley was still an active player. And Utley, who is the last guy who ever wants to talk about this, you know, basically saying, you know, I'll leave it to others. It's not going to be up to me to do it. And here's the other part of that, right? If you're not a self-promoter, it gets harder and harder as the years go on to be able to get in to anything but the Hall of Fame being part of it. And so Utley's not going to do it. I don't know. Hopefully Philadelphia serves as a base of operations for doing it. But, I absolutely believe Chase Utley is a guy who belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Incredible. And that really, honestly, it really makes my day. I would say, if, just from my unintellectual point of view, I guess if I were to bet on one of them, it would have been Jimmy Rollins. But now I'm changing that futures bet off of Howard Megdal's recommendation to Chase the Man Utley. Because
can I just
again,
reference for something else there too? The 08 team, the fact that, and your Harry Callis shout out, like the fact that Harry was
I used
there.
to listen to my boombox, the same boombox that I listen to the Phillies baseball on to this day. I used to sit there next to my boombox and imitate Harry Callis.
I grew up a Mets fan, but there was never a lack of understanding that there was greatness coming out of the radio when Harry Callis was speaking. I was taught to be able to respect and enjoy even the opposing team when they were truly great. And I remember talking to my dad, and Bob Murphy was the Mets broadcaster for a long time. Oh, I love Bob Murphy. He's great. And my dad would say, listen, Bob Murphy is the Mets broadcaster, and we enjoy him. But Harry Callis is the legit great.
Oh, Chase the Man Utley, the Phillies are world champions of baseball. And my whole life. So I had waited my whole life, to experience that and to hear that. So, but I love that because, of course, Chase Utley is, and again, it's one of those things we were talking about with Bryce Harper. It's not just that he was a great baseball player, but here in Philadelphia, men wanted to be him, women wanted to be with him.
Yes.
There is, no cooler baseball player ever. I was just telling Rocco the story the other day about world fucking champions. So he's old enough now that I could slip in some of these, great stories. He already saw Jason Kelce, so, he's good to go. He's good to go in the parade speech department. I was like, imagine the opposite of Jason Kelce's speech, but the F word,
I love it.
Excellent. So, my last question for you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight on Season 3, Episode 5 of Philly Comedy Club and Last Out Media's RUS GUTIN EXPERIENCE on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts, on our Phillies Special Edition with reporter and author Mr. Howard Megdal, my friend from Cherry Hill and from Cherry Hill East. We went to high school together. This is my last question for you, Howard. I love all of my Philly teams, as you know, even the Union and the Wings. If you put Philadelphia in front of it, even if it's a roller derby team, Howard, I will be there and I will buy every piece of, fashion forward gear that I can hide from my wife in my purchase history, okay? With my fan cash and all of my points.
In there.
Dewey to the end, okay?
Yeah.
So I love all of my Philly teams. So I am asking you, from that national objective perspective that I like to get from you, is of all of the, let's just say the major four, the big four Philly teams, of all of them, who do you think is the next one to bring us a championship and a parade down Broad Street?
I think it's the Sixers. If I had to pick one,
yes!
I think it is. I have been a believer in Joel Embiid from the beginning. I think they have figured out a pathway to making it work with Embiid and Simmons. Yes. I ultimately, I like the leadership that is running that team now.
Oh, yeah.
I think, it is no easy feat in an Eastern Conference that features the Brooklyn Nets, without question.
Correct.
All of that said, fundamentally, I think the Sixers are well positioned. Now, the Phillies, I think, I give this a fair amount of thought. The Phillies are second. The Phillies could absolutely break through. You get to the postseason, it gives you an opportunity. But the Phillies are, I think, second behind them. And it's going to be a while for the Eagles. We all know that, right?
Hey, you see the Super Bowl jersey, my main gig is my Birds, of course. They're always first and foremost. And I was actually the reason I wanted to keep this focused on the Phillies is that I could try to rope you in to an Eagles discussion on a later day, because you can't give Russell can't fit an Eagles discussion into one segment.
I am in for that anytime you have me.
Yeah, but thank you
I
for
am all
saying,
in.
yeah, but I love that. So there, you're on the record. I have you next season in the fall when the Eagles come back. So, but
Yes.
but I love that you said the Sixers. You can ask my wife. I mean, I am a Sixers fan through and through. When we lived in Los Angeles, when Kobe was still playing and the Sixers were so, I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
couldn't, I still was like, even at the bar, they were like, if you want to know about the Sixers, ask Russ. I mean, even when everyone was checked out, before Sam Hinkie, before the process, during the
Mm-hmm.
process, going with Howie Jastro
All of that.
to process games and watching oh my God, Covington hit game winners during the
TJ
process.
McConnell.
Oh, I love TJ McConnell. I love
Oh, me
that piece
too.
about him in the New York Times. We love
Mm-hmm.
him. We called him Scrappy Doo. So
Yeah.
my wife has gone through this entire process with me. But in this house, we worship Joel Embiid.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely love the Sixers this year. I just purchased a Dwight Howard jersey on the day that he got thrown out of his first of two games.
Very
And
exciting.
me and Dara
Big
said,
moment.
Russell, Dwight Howard getting thrown out of school, that is your thing. This is on brand for you. Getting suspended, getting in trouble with the referees. This is it for you. No, we love Dwight Howard. We love where the team is. We love where Doc Rivers is taking the team to, because I love Brett Brown Howard, but
Yes.
he was a lot like Gabe Kapler, where after they would lose by 20 points, he was still giving you like the worst metaphors, like, a flower is only gonna grow on Wednesdays if they're watered with Poland Spring, and they're like, is Ben gonna take a jump shot or not, Brett? You know what I mean? Like, you know, Joel calling out
Yeah.
during the playoffs with a bellyache. Like, I feel like a lot of those things are sort of past us. Last night's win was
Yeah.
definitive. A performance off the bench like no other. Shake Milton for almost 29 points. I mean, it was awesome. So I just feel like they have that makeup now where they can win with Joel, they can win without Joel. They seem built for the long haul. Bringing in George Hill,
Yeah.
a consummate professional, a shooter.
No small thing for this team and what this team needs.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
yeah, at both ends, George Hill, someone who's going to help that team. And again, if you think about where the Sixers are as a franchise right now, they really need to be thinking. I know it sort of seems like a simplistic way of thinking about it, but what are you doing in the Eastern Conference Finals to get past the Brooklyn Nets? That really has to be the way they're thinking. And so,
right.
from that perspective, a George Hill addition means everything.
Oh yeah, and he's a plus defender. I think that
Exactly.
some of the Sixers fans are a little, they're a little focused on the fact that he's a shooter. But unlike bringing JJ Redick back, which my wife would have very much liked JJ Redick to be back here. She's all about JJ Redick,
Understood.
and when he's on, but
Sure.
he doesn't defend.
No,
So to me,
he does
George
not.
Hill
Never
was
did.
like a way better move than a nostalgia move.
Well, and
Bringing
Reddick's
back,
not been very good this year either. Again,
right.
you can't sign the guy based on last year's production. And
It
JJ
would have
Reddick,
been nostalgia. It would have been
that's
that would
true.
have been for the emotional component and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that Joel really listens to him. So the only reason I wouldn't have been upset about it is
Mm-hmm.
the leadership, but I want George Hill because he brings that both ends of the court. He's not the answer, but with the mix that they have going on now, even though I didn't want to get rid of Tony Bradley,
Yes.
I'm still a little bit pissed about that because I've watched him from the G League. I'm watching practice videos of that kid. He really stepped up in Joel's absence, but
For sure.
I do feel like George Hill was the right move. So
Had to.
I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you joining me here on the show tonight. Not only to talk to me about the Phillies and all of my teams and your beautiful, wonderful book, The Baseball Talmud, going into its second edition, The History of Jewish Baseball Players for the layman. Okay. And I refer to the layman as anybody who is not you and me, Howard.
That's
Okay.
fair.
But
Yeah, I think
also,
that's true.
like I was saying before the show, I'm just really pleased you joined me here tonight because I look up to you. I admire you. I read every article that you write, even if it's not a sport that I know anything about or even know what you're writing about. When you ask a question on a Zoom call of a coach or of a player, I am that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm pointing at you. I know that guy, but you can ask Dara. I have always admired and looked up to you. I thought you were the smartest person I had ever met when I was a kid. You were smarter than all the teachers. You were smarter than all the students. You were a brilliant writer and filmmaker, even in high school. And you encouraged me to write for your humor magazine and to take some of the stories that I had been telling you in the hallway and to focus them and to put them in front of people. And I don't think that I would have learned how to structure myself and to write for myself so early if it had been for you. So thank you
I
for joining me tonight.
Russ, I've always loved the time we have together. I have followed your career with unbridled excitement, and
Oh,
this was so great for me to be able to see you and catch up with you. Thanks for inviting me.
oh, Howard, that really, it absolutely means the world to me. I can't thank you enough for joining us and for broadening our horizons and our intellectual spectrums in the world of Philly sports on our Philly special edition of Season 3, Episode 5 of Philly Comedy Club and Last Out Media's RUS GUTIN Experience on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcast. Thank you for joining us, Howard. Give it up, ladies and gentlemen. Go Phillies, go Flyers, go Sixers, go Birds. Good night.